On a quiet street in a small, forgotten village lived a man named Arif. He wasn't famous or wealthy, and his life wasn't extraordinary by any measure. Arif worked as a humble tailor, spending his days stitching clothes for the villagers who barely made enough to feed themselves. But what set Arif apart from the others was the secret he carried, one that not a soul in the village knew about. Years ago, on a particularly stormy night, Arif had found an old, tattered book in the attic of his home. It was ancient, its pages yellowed with time. As he flipped through it, he discovered it wasn't just any book. It was a magical book, one that granted the reader a single wish. Arif had read the words over and over, and with each passing day, the temptation to make that wish grew stronger. His life was simple, almost too simple. Arif had never known wealth, nor had he known the kind of love that people write stories about. His days were spent alone, with only the rhythmic sound of his sewing machine for company. Though he had never felt sorry for himself, the idea of having one wish made him wonder what it would be like to change his life. He wasn't unhappy, but something deep within him yearned for more, a different kind of life, a life filled with purpose, a life of significance. As the years passed, Arif carefully guarded the book. It was a secret. He hadn't told anyone about it, not even his closest friends. What would they say? Would they think he was foolish for believing in such an old myth? What if the wish turned out to be a curse instead of a blessing? No, Arif decided that the book was for him alone to ponder, a mystery that he would keep locked away in his heart. But as time wore on, the village changed. The once close-knit community began to drift apart, divided by greed, jealousy, and the desperate pursuit of wealth. Arif noticed that the villagers who had once helped one another now kept to themselves, unwilling to share their fortune with those in need. Arif saw the rise of selfishness and the fall of kindness, and his heart grew heavy with sorrow. He wished, more than ever, for a world that was different, one where people cared for each other again, where generosity and love were valued more than gold. One crisp winter evening, as the first snowflakes of the season fell, Arif found himself sitting alone by the fire. The wind howled outside, and the cold was biting, but inside, the warmth of the fire seemed to embrace him. In that moment of solitude, Arif finally made his decision. He would use his wish. He opened the book, his hands trembling slightly, as he read the words for the first time aloud. "One wish you may have. Be careful what you ask for once made, it cannot be undone." Arif closed his eyes and thought deeply. He could wish for wealth, for fame, for anything his heart desired. But none of those things would bring him the peace he sought. No, his wish would not be for himself. It would be for others. He wished for the villagers to rediscover the kindness that had once bound them together, for their hearts to open to one another, to care for each other as they once had. When he finished speaking, a warm light enveloped him, and for a moment he thought he had fallen asleep. The next morning, as the sun rose over the snow-covered village, Arif stepped outside and immediately noticed the change. The streets were filled with laughter and warmth. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years were talking to one another, sharing meals, helping one another with their chores. The village that had once been divided now seemed to be united again. Arif walked through the streets, his heart swelling with joy. He had done it. His wish had come true. The kindness that had been lost in the village had returned. People were no longer focused on accumulating wealth. They were focused on building relationships, on helping one another without expecting anything in return. The transformation was subtle yet powerful, and Arif knew that this was what he had always wanted, not for himself, but for the community he loved. As the years passed, the village flourished. The people found joy in the simple things: a shared meal, a helping hand, a warm smile. The streets were no longer filled with greed, but with genuine care for one another. And though Arif was still the humble tailor he had always been, he felt fulfilled in a way he had never imagined possible. His wish had come true in a way he never could have predicted. But Arif also learned something valuable, something that could never be found in a wish. He learned that true happiness didn't come from material possessions or fleeting desires. It came from the connections we make with others, from the love we give and receive, from the kindness we share with those around us. On his deathbed, many years later, Arif was surrounded by the villagers whose lives he had touched. They thanked him for his kindness, for his selflessness, for the life he had led. But Arif only smiled and whispered softly, "It wasn't me, it was you. You all found the goodness in yourselves." And with that, he closed his eyes, content. His one wish had not only changed his life, it had changed the lives of everyone around him. And that, Arif knew, was the greatest gift of all.